All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. I appreciate you coming out on this cold day. My name is Bella Gerlich. For those of you who haven't been here before, welcome to this evening event. So tonight's Q&A panel discussion on the Ascendance of Harley Quinn, essays on DC's enigmatic villain. We're proud to be hosting this panel tonight, 3 of which are the library's very own, and all of who are from Texas Tech. In 1 minute, I'll introduce you tonight's moderator, and we'll tell you more about each of our panelists. Before then, I want to present them with a token of our appreciation for their partnership with us tonight. I'm going to leave them under here. That way you can't run off with them. We're recording this evening's discussion in a few days' time. It'll be found on ThinkTech, our online publishing and archival service. Watch for the link to this and other libraries' events and news on Facebook and Twitter pages. Speaking of Twitter, break out your phones and follow along and join in the conversation with hashtag Harley Quinn. Copies of the book are available to purchase tonight, and feel free to also pick up a free copy of the poster so you can have our panelists sign it as well. That's super cool. Before you leave, don't forget to stop by the Lubbock Con table and get the details for this weekend's event at the Civic Center, and a big thanks to them for also participating in tonight's event. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn the mic over to co-editor and associate librarian for digital resources, Shelley Barba.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight. Here, I'll put my name now that I'm up here. And I want to thank the TTU Libraries and Dean Gerlich for hosting us, and for y'all, again, coming out on this very cold day. It always seems the weather turns when we have these fun events, but you made the trek, and I appreciate it. This project was very much a labor of love for us, and I'm just so glad that we can have this opportunity to share with everyone. I have a few set questions for our panel, and then we'll open it up to the audience. So if you have questions, I'll remind you later, but I'll plant it right now. When you do have a question, please use the mic as we are recording it, and then that way the audio gets picked up. So starting at the very end there, we have Ian Barba, who was a contributor for the book. He's an associate librarian here at the library, and his writing has appeared in Cases on 3D Technology Application and Integration in Education, and he serves as an editor for the journal Archivation Exploration. Then right next to him, we have Derek Moreland. He is the writer of the comic Legends of Streaming, has published in Cease Cows, Coffin Bell, and the Surly Nerd. Am I saying that right? Okay. That's a hard word for me. And he's also the co-host of the podcast Blah Blah Comics, Blah Blah Curse Words, Assembling the Avengers, and the new one, DC Animated Adventures. And then closest here is my co-editor, Joy Perrin. She is an associate librarian here at the libraries and has published mainly on the topic of digital libraries and collections, and is author of the book Digitizing Flat Media. Now, the book, Ascendance of Harley Quinn, the book itself is divided into 5 parts of various chapters done by authors from literally all over the world. And the 5 sections, we have things about the character history, we have about her relationship with the Joker, relationships with other characters. We also have parts about her representation in various media. And finally, the last chapter is about philosophical and more like literary critique that you would find in like an English literature kind of class. Joy and I were editors, as I said. But in my mind, this book was more like a movie, and that Joy was the director. She had the vision, she had the idea, and I was more the producer, where I was coordinating all of the moving parts, working with the authors, and really came together and put the book. So my first question for Joy for tonight is, what made you want to do this book?
Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to do the book is because Rob Weiner had just published the Joker book. And I'm like, well, if Joker has a book, then we should also have one for Harley Quinn. So I knew it was possible. And I had already actually been doing the mediography. And so I'm like, well, if I'm doing the mediography, I might as well have a book for it.
Very librarian answer. I was already doing a bibliography, and it just snowballed from there. It's what we do. And so for the character of Harley Quinn, for those who don't know, the character was created in 1992 for the Batman the Animated Series, an animated television show that was about it. So I want to ask each of the contributors, not characters, what made you become interested in Harley Quinn as a character? We'll start with Ian at the end.
Okay, well, some history on me. I actually grew up watching this character as a teenager, I guess, when the Batman animated series came out, and she was just a very fun character, very enjoyable, and that's actually where the character comes from. And she's not from the comics, and so that's kind of unique for a comic book character. She was in a children's television show first, and I knew she was in comics and that she was going to be in the Suicide Squad movie, and she had been in some other venues. But it was really going back to those initial, the animated series that drew me to the character.
Yeah. Derek, how about for you?
Ian stole my answer. I've been a huge fan of Batman the Animated Series, all the DC animated work. In fact, the DC Animated Adventures podcast that I'm doing now with my friend Lance, we're actually going through every episode of Batman the Animated Series all the way through Justice League Unlimited, recording our own fan commentaries as a podcast. So it's something that was a big part of my life for a really long time. I love the animated series. It was really my introduction to Batman, more so than Michael Keaton's Batman, more so than Adam West's Batman. That was the Batman I fell in love with, and you can't fall in love with that show and follow that show without discovering Harley Quinn as a character. And more so later when we started developing more aspects of her, episodes like Harlequin 8 or Harley and Ivy, when they really dive into her as a character, really fascinated me and really drew me in and wanted me to discover and kind of find out more about her. So yeah, for me, it really does go back to the animated series as well.
Joy?
What was the question?
What made you become interested in Harley Quinn as a character?
I grew up watching Batman the Animated Series. And when I started thinking about I wanted to write a book or do something, I actually started looking at Poison Ivy because she had a longer history. And as I was reading comics to get more familiar with Poison Ivy, I realized Harley was the better character. And I'm like, oh, I love this. And then I realized, like, oh, she's a psychiatrist. I'm like, I have a degree in psychology. She's blonde. I'm blonde. She's not really blonde. But anyway, it just seemed like she had more to her as a character and was more fun to read than other characters actually in the Batman animated series. Anyway, that's my answer.
Yeah. So the theme in a lot of this was the Batman animated series of how instrumental and influential that really was, I think, for people in our generations and those that followed. And just animated series overall. Derek's chapter in particular focuses almost exclusively on Batman the Animated Series, and that goes really well into my next question that I had for Ian and Derek as contributors. So each of y'all's chapters focus on Harley Quinn in a medium that is not comic books and or it's not in print. It's more visual. So I wondered if y'all could speak a little bit about your chapters and why you chose to look at Harley Quinn through that media. We'll start with Derek this time.
Okay. Well, for me, like I say, a lot of it was a fascination with how much the animated series, which was a children's animated series program. I mean, it was one of those animated series that punched up. I mean, it allowed kids to like really think about the material and aged with them, kind of like Harry Potter does.
Yes.
A reason Harry Potter stuck around so well. And a lot of that was that Harley Quinn's bisexuality is in the animated series. It's right there. It's subtext as part of that series if you're looking for it. So, and I was endlessly fascinated at how much they were able to make that clear and get it past, at the time, a very, very staunch standards of broadcast practices, and still manage to tell that story and get those ideas across. And I really wanted to delve into that specifically, how they were able to get into grown-up themes in ostensibly a children's TV show.
Nice. Ian, how about your chapter?
Well, I wrote the chapter on video games and Harley's representation therein. And as I was researching that chapter, I was thinking back to her depiction in the animated series, and I actually had to do some research and actually go read the comic books that were written as well, which I had never read before. And it turned out my memory was more or less right, that her depiction in those earlier materials was more positive and more consistent with what you would expect from like a children's and young teen show. Like some of the more mature sexuality you see in the video games sort of lended itself to a sexualization of the character in a very negative sort of way, and it actually ended up detracting from the video games, which are really, really fun. But unfortunately, in my opinion anyway, her character suffered as a result.
Good. Joy, do you want to talk about your chapter?
My chapter is the mediography, because the other chapter I turned in, we rejected.
We rejected Joy's own chapter.
And the reason we rejected is because we read the rest of the chapters. I'm like, oh, this is not up to snuff. So as the editor, I'm going to reject this. But the mediography, why did I write the mediography?
Yes.
The mediography is there to help people who like the character discover new aspects of it or new representations of it. So I've watched every animated version of Harley except the two that are on the table, which I didn't realize were happening at the time because I was writing a book. But
They're fantastic. You'll love them.
yeah, good. I can't wait. I'm going to go home and watch them now. But it talks about the mediography talks about the animated series. It talks about specific comic books. So it gives people a place to go and like, oh, I want to read more about that. And so it's more of a discovery tool. There you go.
What a librarian answer again. So in y'all writing your chapters for the book and Joy working in the book, was there anything you discovered that you hadn't realized about Harley Quinn before?
I'll go first. I didn't realize, and kind of taps into what Ian was saying, I didn't remember how strong she was. Even being such a fan of the animated series, you get this idea in your head of Harley, and it's always Harley and Joker, and that Joker's the dominant in that relationship and that Harley's the submissive. But so many episodes are about her breaking out of that dynamic. Yes, they usually end with her cycling back into that dynamic, and that's partially because it's a 22-minute syndicated animated program where all the toys have to be put back in the toy box by the end of the episode. But so much of her arc is being her own person and showing off what she can do. To go back to Harley and Ivy, even before you get to the subtext, she's breaking into a vault and doing a better job of it than career criminal Poison Ivy without the Joker at the beginning of the episode, just to prove she can.
Yeah.
She captures and nearly kills Batman in Mad Love to the point where Batman has to get her to call the Joker to get him out of a situation. She's smart. She's capable. And these are aspects of her that you totally forget or get subsumed by the overall popular conception of her. So it really hit me just how much of her own person Harley really is by going back and exploring the animated series again.
Sure. Well, when I went back and looked at some of these things that I had seen as a kid, I was struck by how much they held up over the passage of time, and that especially the work done by anything that Tim or Deanie had done relating to this character, how canon that felt and how out of character she felt in some of the depictions in the video games and some of the later comics I ended up reading. And I was just impressed by how they created this character and in their entire universe, as a children's show, but how much they respected the audience in doing so. And if you haven't seen Batman the animated series, go do so. It's the best version of Batman.
The Blu-rays are coming out this summer.
Oh,
Wow,
nice
good.
plug. And just for clarification, Ian, which video games were you looking at?
I was looking at the Arkham series of video games, which are by far the most popular and in terms of sales and
Probably critical reviews too. I
yeah,
think
as well.
Telltale's gotten really good reviews, but I think if you average out the aggregate of all the Arkham games, you're probably going to get the best. Those are the highest.
Yeah, absolutely. And so there are 4 of those, and those are the 4 that I looked at.
Okay. So things that I learned about Harley Quinn during this, I thought I really knew everything. But then there was a chapter on something called hybristophilia, which is when women fall in love with psychopaths. And I hadn't really considered the character in that perspective. I'd considered her as a psychopath, or a female version of the psychopath, which was what my original chapter was about. But this one was so much better. The other thing that I thought of, and I never really noticed it until now, but her costume. Is she a clown? Is she a Joker? Is she a Harley Quinn, which is actually a character from opera? And if you look at her costume, it's actually all the different kinds smushed together. So she's like a Joker, she's like a Harley Quinn, and she's also like a jester.
That was actually one of my favorite chapter is the one that discusses about her and the commedia dell'arte and the influences from Italian opera of the 18th and 19th century onto this children's character. It's a very, very good chapter. It's by far my favorite one. So I'll ask now all of y'all, because for me, I love Harley Quinn and I like it a lot, not as much as Joy. Like, she's very this is her passion. I love books and making books and editing books and that process. And so for me, I'm interested in knowing what was the most difficult part in either writing your chapter or in putting the book together. We'll start with Joy this time.
Yeah, I'll start this time.
Joy's ready.
So the citations. If anyone here wants to write a book about comic books and you have other authors, make sure you be very clear about how to do comic book citations, because as an example, Mad Love, which is very influential for the character and for all the chapters, there's 5 or 6 different versions of it, and there's 12 different ways to cite those 5 versions. And then another thing I'd like to point out that was frustrating to me emotionally is that you'll notice that Amanda Connor is the first author, and both alphabetically and on the cover of that one. But people kept putting Jimmy...
Palmiotti.
Say it again.
Palmiotti.
They kept putting his name first in the citations. And I know that MLA, you're allowed to put one author above first if that's the author you're talking about, but he never was the one being talked about. So I'm like, what's that about? So I kept having to switch them, and they were hard because they would sort as being in the P's, and I have to switch it to sort to being in the C's, and so that was frustrating.
For me, I feel like more than anything, it was trying to find something new to say. I mean, I am not nearly the first person to talk about Harley Quinn's bisexuality or Batman the Animated Series. I doubt I'm the 100th person, and I doubt I'm the 1,000th cis white male to talk about this topic. So really it was something that fascinated me. It was something I wanted to write about and talk about, but also it came with the slice of, am I qualified to talk about this? Is this something that another cis white male needs to lecture about or talk about? So it was trying to find a new angle. It was trying to find, give myself permission to do it and keep it fresh and keep it new and try not to be the stereotype, the neckbeard who is lecturing you about your comics.
Comic book guy.
Yes, I am very much a comic book guy. I'm trying not to be the comic book guy.
I guess I have a similar sort of answer. As I was doing research for my chapter, I had a sense of guilt that I was the one writing it. And even though I didn't find anything written specifically about Harley Quinn in video games, there's plenty that's been written about negative gender depictions in video games. And I had to dig through a lot of garbage, basically. There's a large and loud part of the gaming culture that is garbage. Having to read through some of that stuff and actually read through the studies that have been done showing how these depictions can affect people in very serious ways was depressing at times. I mean, that was the most difficult part for me.
What was the most difficult part for you?
For me, I think, wow, I did not prepare for you to ask me a question. I
Crossfire.
think, so in editing and preparing this manuscript for our publisher, Joy and I took a retreat where we literally got away from husbands and children and our work and rented a house to edit and do citations. And I think the hardest part for me was, since we had so many contributors from around the world, is the spelling of looking at what's English spelling or American spelling, and then different how people do quotations is very different around the world, and I did not know that. But now I'm very versed in how Polish scholars do citations and do quotes, and how to make it look appropriate for an American audience. So that was a lot of heavy lifting on my part, was translating, because we had works from Poland, from France, Mexico, Argentina, Ireland, Australia. It's really all over the place. And even though we put forth, a style guide, no one reads those.
No.
That's why you have editors to help you out. So the flip of that, you talked about the most difficult part. What was the most rewarding or fun part for doing this book? Let's start with Joy.
The most rewarding or fun part was reading all the articles about Harley Quinn, which was my original real reason for doing this book. The other part has been being able to talk to people about it and seeing how excited other people are about the character. Mm-hmm. That has been a great experience, because then you realize you're not alone. Derek?
I got to watch Batman the Animated Series again and call it work. It was great.
Yeah. So I had never read any of the comics, really. I'm not a comic book guy, but I had to do it for this, and so that was actually a lot of fun. Those comics like Mad Love, it's right over there in that case. They're really good stories, and I remembered them from the TV show because it was heavily inspired by one of the episodes there, and also I'll agree with Joy, the excitement I could see in the other authors when the book was finally done. It was very rewarding to read other people's work as well.
Then kind of wrapping up here on the pre-prepared questions of, other than your own chapter, what is your favorite chapter in the book and why? We'll start with Ian.
Okay. I forget the title of it, but it's I believe her name was Megan Sinclair, and she wrote the chapter on Harley Quinn as a proxy for the reader. And it's something I didn't really consider. I guess being a guy, I didn't immediately put myself into that role. But it was fun to see her talk about how Harley Quinn sort of serves that role for a lot of women that really identify with this character, and I would say that was my favorite chapter.
Mm-hmm. Derek?
Man, I love being in the middle. I almost never have to start. There's a chapter by Brandon Braga, not Braga. What is his last name? Brandon Binge. He's the, Brandon Braga's a Star Trek guy. Brandon Binge, who works at Star Comics right here in Lubbock, he did a chapter as well. And it was actually about Harley Quinn's sales and the ups and downs and dips and sales, and how they compared to other characters who kind of fit certain aspects of her as a character. And just as a comic book guy, as a numbers guy, I was endlessly fascinated at the peaks and valleys of her popularity, and how it's, like I say, how it kind of signs in and out, and how it's, maybe on its way out, maybe cycling back up again through Suicide Squad, and just how that related to comics in general and the 70-plus year history of comics since Action Comics #1.
Nice. Joy? What is your favorite chapter?
Oh, right. They're all my favorite chapter. So like
Cheat.
children, they're all
Yeah,
good.
all of your children.
They're all favorite. And I do have a favorite child, but chapter. I like the hybristophilia one. It was probably the hardest to edit, and we decided to keep it, even though it was going to take hours, like hundreds of hours of editing to get that thing to where it was readable. But it was also the most interesting. My second favorite, I think, was the bisexuality representation one. And then there was another one about, I liked the one about her representation as a jester or a Harlequin, so her identity. And let's see, and I really liked Derek's chapter because after reading a ton of things about Mad Love, his actually talked about a wider breadth of media. So it was nice to get that perspective, and it was a refresher. It was really nice. I wish more people had talked about the animated series, but
Thank you.
you're welcome.
So all the chapters except mine?
Oh, no. I also liked his chapter. Actually, I haven't seen
You
any
need
of
some
the.
ice for that burn.
I hadn't seen any of the video games because I don't play video games, and so I hadn't really thought about her representation in those video games. And then I read Ian's chapter. I'm like, oh, this is bad. I don't want. I'm so glad I didn't play them. Like, look at me being good. That I'm not supporting this the bad representation of women in video games. So, like, I did also enjoy yours. Then, see, anyway.
Thank you.
The cheat code on that is if you go to YouTube, people put all the Harley Quinn scenes into a YouTube video, so you don't have to play through
Why didn't you tell me that
the
earlier?
hundreds of hours of Arkham Asylum. Playthroughs are just like the cut scenes of that. So that's the cheat code on those. All right, and so for the final question, I promise for mine, and then we're going to open it up. So have yours ready. Is for our panel here. Why do you think Harley Quinn has become so popular in the past 20 years? It's really quite remarkable how popular the character is. If you go to any kind of Comic-Con, she's one of the most cosplayed characters or versions of her. Merchandise, that was like my amazing, it's doing this book. I saw all of the merchandise that has been produced not only here in America but around the world for this character. So why do y'all think? We'll start with Derek.
I'm still trying to formulate an answer. I do think it's because she is such a strong representation of femininity. In a world even within the world of Batman, when you've got Batman and the Joker and Bane and Two-Face, you also have some of the strongest women in comics. You've got Batgirl, you've got Poison Ivy, you've got Catwoman, and you've got Harley Quinn, and she hangs with that, and she came into that. I personally really do think the bisexuality subtext that has since become text was a large part of that. It was something that young people, millennials essentially, could respond to, or zennials, or whatever we're supposed to call ourselves. It was something we could all respond to. It was something new and different that we could grasp onto and latch onto. And when she went from the children's animated series to the comics, when she made that pass and became literally canonized, when she became part of the DC canon, like I say, she joined the ranks of these other strong female characters. But she was also new. She was different. Everybody loves the Joker. Now women had a Joker character of their own that they could latch onto. This is going to sound really weird. In the introduction to the Johnny the Homicidal Maniac trade paperback from years and years and years ago, if you haven't read Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, it's hilarious stuff from Jonan Vasquez, the guy that created Invader Zim, believe it or not. Rob Schrab, the guy that created Scud the Disposable Assassin, talks about everybody has a monster inside them that they don't let out. And there's a good reason we don't let it out. But we can let that monster feed vicariously. Some people use Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Some people use Harley Quinn. And I think that's absolutely wonderful.
Ian, follow up?
Sure. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. I'll also add that out of all the characters in the Batman universe, I think Harley is the most fun. Batman can be, very dark and gritty and glum a lot of the times, and a lot of the villains can be as well. And depending on who's writing the Joker, he can, and be more corny, funny, but usually he's more depicted as sort of insane, psychotic, evil, scary. And Harley, in that sense, is a better, more fun version of the Joker. And in Mad Love, I'll go back to that one. I think it's interesting that Batman's origin story was sort of forced upon him, and the Joker has a couple of origin stories, but they're usually they happen to him. And in that story, which I think is still considered Harley's sort of canon origin story, she chooses to become Harley Quinn. She has the agency to become that person, and that's different than Batman and the Joker. Usually the two people she's playing off of.
Joy?
So one of the reasons why I think she's become very popular is that she's one of the best anti-heroes. She's also one of the best anti-villains. So she's both good and bad, and it's unusual, I guess, to have a character in comic books or movies or even animated series that have that roundness to them, where you both see her bad side and her good side. She has good motivations, she has bad ones, and one of the things I've talked about before about this character is that she doesn't really care what people think about her. She cares what the Joker thinks about her, but she doesn't really care about what other people think about her. And as being a woman watching media, that was unusual. And so that was refreshing. So I don't know if other people feel that way, but it seems to me there's just so much to her that people can latch on to whatever they like, and she's fun.
Okay. I love it. I love all those answers. So now we're going to open up for questions from the audience. We have a mic there. Julie's making the rounds with it. Not all at once now.
The sun is directly in my eyes right now.
Oh, the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing.
Oh, no.
Push it once? No.
Nope. You can try to talk loud.
You can come up to the podium and ask a question as well. Okay, come up.
Check.
Okay,
All
that
right.
one works.
Boom.
Okay. So my question's for Joy.
Oh.
What is it about Harley's relationship with Poison Ivy that is so unique? Like, why do they click more than Harley Quinn would click with anyone else in the DC universe?
It's interesting because it's actually I guess the real question is, why would they pair Poison Ivy with Harley? It's like Harley already had a pair. She had the pair with the Joker. But when Paul Dini put her with Poison Ivy, they were like, oh, this is a girl story. And then they realized that that Poison Ivy had needed somebody to play off of. And that's the same thing with the Joker. The Joker's better when Harley Quinn's there because he has someone to play off of and cheer. And so Poison Ivy also needed that. So Poison Ivy became a much better character when she had someone to like, even as a friend or not a friend. That does that answer your question? Okay, awesome.
And that's someone talks about that in our book, in their chapter, about how the Joker's better with Harley because they play off of each other.
Oh yeah.
I remember that.
Well, the Joker needs an audience, even if it's an audience of one. And then you
Yeah.
kind of almost flip that with Poison Ivy, because then Poison Ivy, for want of a better term, becomes the straight man. Yes, thank you. Somebody got it.
That was the best
I appreciate
reaction.
that. I genuinely appreciate that.
Yeah.
This is for any of the panelists, or all of you, if you care to answer. I don't know about you guys. I think Margot Robbie was by far the best thing in Suicide Squad, and maybe the only good thing. But can you? Do you? How do you feel about them? Making more movies with her, or do you think a better actress would fit that role? I can't think of anybody better, in my opinion. But and also, do you think it'll be kind of they'll do more sequels and Harley Quinn storylines? I mean, there's money there, so.
I'll answer first. Margaret Robbie did a great job. I can't imagine anybody else doing Harley now. Much better than what they were going to do originally, which, like, there was going to be a movie with Harley Quinn, and it was going to either be Courtney Love or Madonna. And I'm just like, those are wrong people for the character.
There's also Batman 5, so I mean, there's all kinds of things wrong with that.
Yeah. They had planned on doing a Gotham City Sirens movie with Margaret Robbie being a producer, and she was like, I'm going to have creative control. And I heard they had canceled that or pushed it back so that they could do a movie with Harley and Joker. Specifically, what's his name's?
Jared Leto. Yeah,
Jared
good-
Leto. Yeah, that they were going to do a movie with them instead of the other one. I'm like, oh,
A lot of that is up in the air right now because of the incredible tanking of Justice League.
oh, good.
Yeah, the Suicide Squad 2 has a new director. Leto, Robbie, and Will Smith are all coming back for sure. They've all signed on. But other than that, everything, with the possible exception of the Joker origin movie, is very, very nebulous. I think they're still pretty on board for the Joker origin solo film starring not Jared Leto.
Oh, good.
But yeah, a lot of that is in just complete, let's see what happens after Flashpoint, basically.
I really hope that they do actually produce more movies with her in it. I think there's a belief that if a movie is led by a woman, it's not going to make any money. And I think Wonder Woman did.
Wonder Woman smashed that.
Yeah,
for sure.
Now they have to try to do that again with someone who isn't a hero. So
I definitely think it's possible. The problem with Suicide Squad was definitely not Margot Robbie, and the problem with Suicide Squad wasn't Harley Quinn. I think the biggest problem with Suicide Squad is they set Harley back to zero. You know, we've spent so much time with this character, literally 20, 25 years with this character, breaking her away from the Joker to the point where you get the movie Batman and Harley, Joker gets a line. He doesn't get a mention. There's not a picture of him. There's no shadow. There's a line about Joker venom, and that's it. In the comics, she's broken off her relationship with the Joker. It's done. And then we just dialed all that back to zero with the movie and just set that relationship all back up together again. Now, yes, it is introducing a new audience potentially to these two characters and their quote-unquote status quo. But I do feel, we've spent so much time breaking her out of that relationship and making her own character, which she was always, had the potential to be in the first place. And I feel it's a bit digressive to pull her all the way back to that. Now, hopefully, Suicide Squad 2, Joker and Ivy, Gotham City Sirens, Joker and Harley, Gotham City Sirens, any of those can perhaps advance the plot, but considering all the footage that Suicide Squad cut, if you just see Suicide Squad and don't know anything about Joker and Harley, you think that they are a perfect couple and they work really well together despite being villains. You don't see any of the abuse. You don't see any of the bad stuff that comes with that relationship. So that to me was the disappointing part of Suicide Squad's Harley Quinn, not Margot Robbie.
Do you have any comment, Ian?
I don't know if I can add that much. I didn't like the movie either. I thought Harley Quinn's character was merely okay in an otherwise terrible movie. I prefer the animated series.
Yeah, that's fair. And just to kind of put this in for you, before Margot Robbie came in, because literally 2005 to the present, all of my time is compacted into one. I can't distinguish years. So I don't remember when I thought this, but it was clearly before Margot Robbie was announced as Harley Quinn that I really, really thought Anna Faris would make a really good Harley Quinn, that she had like the spunk and the athleticism of the background, like with the gymnastics. She has really good comedic timing, and I felt like she could be really mean. Oh, dear. So that was always in my mind, kind of like my own fan casting until Margot Robbie got it. And now, once it's set, well, that's who it is. Like, it's hard to imagine, anyone else being Iron Man. It's hard to imagine anyone else being Harley Quinn.
Who directed Suicide Squad?
Same guy that did Bright. What's his name? Oh, God. Thank you. It was like tip of the tongue. David Ayer, yeah.
So Derek says he's the comic book guy. During the writing of the book, one of the things that I used him for was to be like, I need evidence that this thing didn't happen, that this person said happened. Help me. So he's been very good at.
Oh yeah, I got random texts just for a year straight.
It's like,
Hey, what was that issue you said that Harley was hitting on Catwoman? at the time I remembered what issue of Gotham, it was like Gotham City Sirens number 14 or something, and just yeah, it was I was kind of just on call at any given moment.
Good fact checker.
Yeah. DC keeps letting bad people write, direct, and
Yes.
produce their movies, and they shouldn't.
Once they stop that, it'll get so much better.
If only they had better writing and directing and producing.
Anything else? Any other questions?
So this is for either one of you, any one of y'all up there. How do you feel about her representation, though slightly more towards the end of the series for Batman Beyond? I know you mentioned the animated series that came out. I just wanted to know how you felt about that.
Is she in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker? The only thing I've seen her in that property is Return of the Joker, which is my favorite like DC animated film. That's the one I'm looking most forward to for doing for the podcast. I haven't watched beyond the first seasons of Batman Beyond, so I can only speak to her very small appearance in Return of the Joker when you had Dee and the two twins who were like her granddaughters, and she was delightful. It was great. It was really sweet. I'm afraid I can't really speak to it beyond that, though.
No, but the best part about her being in that movie is like, oh, she survived.
Yeah.
And she's not with the Joker. Isn't that great?
Follow up.
Okay, then I'm going to follow up with this, seeing how you mentioned the video games as well. How do you feel about her representation in Injustice as well?
I haven't really played the Injustice series, so I couldn't say much about that. I'm sorry.
I can actually speak to this because I have played the first Injustice game, and I was kind of horrified because her big debut scene is the Joker beating the crap out of her, and then she's like, "Oh, you're back! I love you so much." And it's just like, really, how regressive can you be? That's, I mean, I get that it's a fighting game, but the fact that I am actually playing the Joker, just wailing on Harley Quinn for a couple of rounds to get the story, and I can't pass this. This is a story point. That really bummed me out, man.
That's actually what Ian's chapter is about, is being bummed out by violence on women in video games.
And this is for the whole entire panel. So I would like to actually move back to the comics. Is there any like particular run or any particular person who's actually covered Harley that you enjoy the most? Because at least for me personally, there are some things in Rebirth that make me go,
Let's see, her first original run it was a good attempt, and I love aspects of it, but I don't love the whole thing, because they kind of were trying to find why she was popular. It's a very DC kind of thing to not know why people like their characters. I'm glad you're recording this. But so that was the problem with the first run, is it did a good job of just like, what's Harley like on her own? How do we get people to like her? But it just didn't have a lot of direction. We actually have a chapter about that. The new version with I like the concept of this character. I think they're still, trying to figure out where they can push their boundaries. Do you have a good one?
Okay, so for me, I really have to go with post New 52, pre-Rebirth, when Connor and Palmiotti first got the book. You got her away from Suicide Squad. You got her away from the guy who wrote Supernatural, and I cannot remember his name, but he was writing the first Suicide Squad run. And it had a nice moment between Deadshot wearing Joker's face and Harley Quinn that you kind of had to be there for. But once you got her away from that, but before you got her into the post-Suicide Squad Rebirth stuff, when those were first coming out, they really lessened her work on the Joker. They kind of took her into more of an anti-hero role. She got a supporting cast and with the building.
Yeah.
Poison Ivy was an occasional guest star, but not like a supporting character. Those are really fun books. That was a really good time. It's probably the first couple of graphic novels for Palmiotti and Connor and Palmiotti. I apologize.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I would say those. Or, I mean, she was actually really cool in Hush. Like the little bit that we saw her in Hush, mostly because Jim Lee got to draw her, but those were fun.
So there was
Oh, Gotham City Sirens. I mean, the Gotham City Sirens run is fantastic.
Gotham City Sirens is the one for you.
Yeah.
Have you read it? No, it's good. It's actually really
Hunt
good.
it down. It really is
Yeah.
worth your time.
It's surprisingly good, especially for the character. There was another series that was based on the animated series
Oh, the Batman Adventures books?
Yeah, those,
Yeah, yeah.
those are pretty fun. They play with some weird ideas on it, but as far as fun character, I think at one point it's hinted that she's going to write a book, and so they're like, let's do an issue about it. And so she's going to write a book, and Joker thinks that she's writing a tell-all book about him, and he's angry about it for some reason. It turns out what she's actually writing is a Harley Quinn romance. I'm like, oh, this is so perfect. So I like that representation as well. But if you want to have one series that is a standalone series that does a great job of Harley Quinn, Gotham City Sirens is it.
Yeah, that really is. It's a three-way book with her. That's a terrible phrase. That it's a three protagonist book with her, Catwoman, and Poison Ivy, and basically their hijinks and friendship. And it's really good. It's a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Scott Lobdell wrote a few issues. I can't remember who started the book though.
I don't know you.
All right. Well, going, gone. Excellent. Thank you all so much for coming out and listening to us talk about our book. Please, we have amazing refreshments provided by the library. Thank you so much. Love it, cookies, themed cookies, which is even more important. And if you would like to, the bookstore has books for sale in the back. We'd be happy to sign them for you, or posters. Or if you have other questions, but you're like me and you don't like talking in front of people, we're open for that as well. And we also have a display here of various Harley Quinn titles. So take a look at that. Anything else? Thank you so much for coming. Y'all have a good night.